Lotus Pod.
Great kid.
I thought you said you were an accountant.
I am. What do you have all of these guns around there? You know. Right-wing extremists. Disarm them, and us liberals will disarm.
Welcome to a very spooky edition of Lost and Found and Rewound, a podcast with one man who is not ashamed to admit he moisturizes, another man who is ashamed to admit he moisturizes, claiming that moisturization is vain, and a third man who may never need to moisturize because, as I've said on an earlier episode, he is a magical creature. I am Chris Lost.
I'm Found Jim.
And I'm Rick Rewound.
He did it. A little inside baseball there. This podcast is being recorded whenever we can record. I live 610 miles from Jim. I live 410 miles from Rick. And so,
Are those exact numbers?
if you do the math, if you do the math, you can figure out that Rick lives 200 miles from Jim. I should have made that a math problem.
Yeah, that was the little PSAT. thrown on there.
Triangulation, you could figure out exactly where we are right
where we
now with all that information you just gave.
That's the kind of problem I got wrong on the SAT. But yeah, so Rick was concerned. Well, I was concerned about trying to start releasing these episodes in sequence like once a month because I wasn't sure we'd be able to get together because of logistics. Rick was concerned that we had all this topical talk that we were doing on the episodes.
And you lead with Halloween.
And so I led with spooky.
It makes absolutely no sense out of context. In 2 days, it's going to be meaningless. Or in 360 days, it'll make sense again, if that's when it actually comes out.
Right. This I will point out, this concern that's come to fruition by a man who wrote a highly aggressive political album, maybe starting 4 years before the Trump presidency, and then worried every day that it may not be relevant.
Irrelevant.
And it became more and more relevant.
So foolish.
The other thing I'll point out is this is a podcast about movies. I don't think one of them was released within 2 decades of when we're recording the podcast, so I'm not sure we'll ever go out of date. Or
That's true.
Perpetually out of date.
Right.
But anyway, some housekeeping items. We're starting to listen back to the episodes and make edits. I wanted to apologize because in episode 3, we said that both of the Wilson brothers were in Bottle Rocket, the short film. That's not true. All 3 of the Wilson brothers.
That's right. I forgot. Yeah, the coach-like brother, the brother who I always think of. Is he actually a coach in the show?
He's a coach in the movie.
In the movie. Okay,
yeah.
that's why I think of him as. I actually show the original Bottle Rocket in my video class, and I'm going to show that tomorrow.
Awesome.
Or whenever this comes out.
Right. Now who's being topical?
6 months.
You've just ruined the episode. And then in addition, I accused Rick and Jim on that same episode of being bigoted against Italians for not liking Catherine Bigelow, but she's not an Italian.
So you didn't do. You're just.
Well, now hold on.
Okay.
Her name ends in a consonant, not a vowel, and she is identified online as American. So who the fuck knows what she is? But I still think she's a great filmmaker. All right, and then
Wow.
the films I've seen. This is my last announcement. Films I've seen since we watched this movie: True Romance, which I watched with my son; Taxi Driver; The King of Comedy, both which I watched with my son; Joker, which I was not allowed to take my son to by my wife.
I took my son to see Joker.
I heard that, yeah.
Or he took me to see it.
It was the most innocuous of those 3 films. Zombieland, which I watched with my son; Zombieland Double Tap, same with my son. We went to a double feature. Sanjuro, I watched on a treadmill. And then I watched 2 Scarlett Johansson movies, Jojo Rabbit and Under the Skin.
Oh, man, the Jojo Rabbit, that's that Nazi movie, right?
It's a hilarious film about a Hitler youth who befriends an imaginary Hitler.
Yes.
And I laughed and I cried. Fantastic film.
All right. Maybe I'll consider seeing it.
Oh, you should. You would love it. In fact, you should take your whole family to it. I'm not kidding.
Yeah,
It'd be good.
okay.
The young one might be, I don't know. He's a sophisticated dude.
He is a sophisticate.
Gentlemen, what have you watched since our last? It's been a while.
I watched All the President's Men. The observation, I think my wife made this observation that it actually has a happy ending. Of all the 1970s conspiracy movies, it's the one with a happy ending where the president...
Where Trump is impeached?
Yeah, exactly. Where the president quits, right? As opposed to... And then I thought about 3 Days of the Condor, actually. 3 Days of the Condor actually has a happy ending. So I guess that's Robert Redford. It's Robert Redford, instead of succumbing to the nihilism of the Watergate era, he made hopeful conspiracy movies.
And how does the Marathon Man end?
He has nothing to do with Marathon Man.
I know, but isn't that a conspiracy film?
Does that have a happy ending? I don't remember the ending of...
Dustin Hoffman's in it as well.
Yeah, Dustin Hoffman is in Marathon Man. Yeah. Does that end happy?
I don't remember.
William Goldman wrote that, right? I don't think that has... Does it have a happy ending? See, now I'm going to have to watch Marathon Man again.
You better.
And I'm working my way through every episode of The Rockford Files. So far, I think I'm 10 episodes in. I've seen James Woods. There was an episode with both Suzanne Summers and Jill Clayburgh. The old dude from Babe, Pig in the City, and L.A. Confidential, whatever his name, James, or the actor. He played like a tough tennis instructor. Oh, who was the actual woman who was the tennis player? I can't remember who that was. It's amazing how many famous people are in the Rockford Files, because it's 1974 and it's before they're all famous. I'm loving every moment of it.
And especially the theme song.
The theme song's great, but
In that car.
and the car is great, but
And
honestly,
his lawyer, right? She's in a lot of the early episodes.
yeah, she shows up a couple times. Stuart Margolin, Angel,
Yeah.
he actually has only shown up once so far. He shows up in the pilot, but he directed an episode that had some pretty amazing camera moves. I didn't realize the guy who played Angel in that he's more known as a director. He directed lots of TV, but amazing character actor. And Noah Berry Jr. as his father, and James Garner, of course, is amazing. I laughed out loud. I think I laughed out loud every episode. He says something that's hilarious. So yeah, it's like I've turned into an old retired person. It's like just in the same way people would watch Matlock, right? We'd make fun of old people watching Matlock.
Or Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah, Murder, She Wrote. It's like me sitting there watching old...
But it's not first run. I mean, it's not like you're sitting there watching
that's
first
true.
run.
So it's even more depressing. It's just I'm watching ancient Rockford Files episodes.
At the boon of television, you've decided to ignore
Exactly.
the 300 channels of new content.
New content.
And streaming.
Oh, we got a caller.
We got a caller. Caller number 1. Who is it? What does it say?
Not assigned. Oh, it's a robot.
Oh.
I can't remember what else I watched. I've watched lots of stuff, but I don't remember any of it.
You saw Joker?
Files. I did see Joker. I'm not happy about it.
It was yeah, you're only allowed one podcast rant about the
exactly.
Joker. I'll do it for you. It was beautifully shot. In fact, there's a beautiful iconic scene where he dances down a staircase where I thought that was the only moment in Joker where I was like, boy, this is a really beautiful film.
Yeah,
and
it was really well shot.
But it is horribly written and terribly acted and just garbage. And I was listening to your rant about it and I was like, boy, Rick, you're really giving these people too much credit. They were just, it was just a bad script. It wasn't like they thought through the decisions in that script. They just wrote it and thought they were cool and they weren't. And it was bad.
Yeah, and so there is also that I've talked multiple times in the past week or two, because again, I'm teaching this class, and I'm talking about narrative filmmaking and the idea that you can just, so most people who make videos, right, they think they can just do it. They can just improvise because they hang out with their friends and they shoot a video over the weekend, and it's always stupid, and it has one joke in it, and it's 10 minutes long, right? And that's because they don't plan it out. And so, yeah, and I always say actors always love to talk about how they improvise the film and everything like that, and almost no good movie is improvised, or if there was improvisation, then they rewrote everything. And yeah, I think maybe Joker is a little too improvised, probably.
This is bad. See, again, you're giving it too much credit. Jim, you liked Joker. Why did you like it? What was your... That's why he's so quiet.
What is this now you're talking about?
I'm sorry.
I think Jim
wouldn't know. It was not made in Great Britain.
What Jim told me is he walked out of the theater when he noticed that Cesar Romero refused to shave his mustache and just put that white makeup over the mustache. That really offended him. He was like, if I'm going to watch an actor on screen, he should make a commitment to shave that mustache. He shouldn't just put makeup over it.
So Henry Cavill was essentially carrying on the tradition of Cesar Romero when he refused to shave his mustache.
Right, and then they
for the Superman
digitized
movie.
his upper lip. That is funny. It is, yeah.
That's hubris, digitizing an upper lip. You just say shave the mustache. Yeah. It should grow back.
It'll grow back.
Right. It's easier to have a makeup person put a mustache on your face
than it is to digitize a mustache off.
Oh, yeah, that was what I wanted to share with you. Okay, so Taxi Driver and a $1.5 million budget made $28 million, 18.6 times its investment. King of Comedy on a $19 million budget made $2.5 million. It lost $16.5 million. And Joker on a $55 million budget made $852 million, 15.5 times. So Taxi Driver was the better bet of those three.
And you wonder why I'm just sitting in my basement watching Rockford Files episodes. It's because the world has gone to hell, man.
I agree. I mean, those two, Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, were far better films.
Jim, what have you seen?
I haven't seen any movies since we watched.
Well, what have you watched? What have you consumed, Jim?
Let's see. I was watching just recently some of the new episodes of Travel Man. It's a British show.
Oh, with what's his name? I saw a clip.
I knew you had a gem in there. Travel
You
Man.
never heard of Travel Man?
Never.
It's what's his name?
Richard Ayoade.
Yeah, Richard Ayoade.
From the IT crowd. The IT
Of course,
crowd.
yeah. I'm not familiar.
But
what's the other show he does where, like, there was one, was that the Gadget Man show?
Well, yeah,
I saw
he took over, I think, the Gadget Man earlier.
Gadget Man.
It was Stephen Fry did it, and then he took it over. But Travel Man is more recent, and he's been doing it for several years. But I think he's stopping now. Yeah, I hadn't seen any for a few years, and I watched some new ones just now, and they were very funny. There's some good outtakes of like him making completely out of date film references, and
like us.
Nobody knowing. Yeah.
How dare he?
Yeah. Ancient, like Marlene Dietrich. That's what it was like there. Nobody knows who Marlene Dietrich is, and he can't comprehend that. But other than that, I don't know.
Has he directed a movie lately?
I don't think so.
He directed that pretty amazing Breeders video.
Yeah, with the space people, their
Yeah.
space suits. Yeah, I saw his one movie. I can't remember it. It's like really insulting just to say, oh, it was kind of like a Wes Anderson movie. I don't think it really was, but it's just about kids. It has kids in
Submarine,
it.
right?
Yeah, Submarine.
And then I didn't see The Double, which was with, what's his name? Mark Zuckerberg, Jesse Eisenberg. I remember seeing a preview for that. It's like a Dostoevsky thing. I don't know why I didn't watch that.
So this is a fairly current director.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen The IT Crowd?
Nope.
Oh my gosh.
Is it a TV show?
Yeah.
Why are you even here? Like who?
I'm the audience surrogate.
Okay.
I'm the person who sees the things that people can relate to. You guys are the academics. Look, we've set this up straight. We never said I was the smart one.
I didn't say smart. I thought you watched a lot of TV and watched
What about
good TV.
like Garth Marenghi's Dark Place?
Yeah, you ever seen that?
I have not.
Really?
This is where two brothers gang up on... Look, it's just this, now I know how David Lee Roth felt when the Van Halen brothers would go at him, David Lee Roth had it tied to today's film.
I almost feel like we should force you to sit here and watch an episode of the IT. There's an episode of the IT Crowd, a scene that makes me weep every time I see it. It's so funny, it makes me weep. The heaven where...
Oh, yeah.
I'll put it on the list. Just put that on the list.
You have to watch it soon because it's starting to age. I've watched it recently, and it's starting to age a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's already aging, but
It's starting to age.
like it's...
How's that possible?
Well, it's the early 2000s, and some of the jokes are starting to feel, non-enlightened.
Obama jokes. There's Obama
This
jokes
is
in.
before Obama. Well, no, I think the last season was.
They're joking about having a bad president in office.
It's
Bush.
a British TV show.
Oh, well, doesn't every country care about our president?
I think they do, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think they do too. Our synopsis for the president's analyst, Rick. What do you got?
Yeah, I wrote one. A psychiatrist is recruited to be the president of the United States therapist. What starts as a dream job descends into a paranoid trip through the swinging 60s.
Again, me being the dumb one, I was hoping you were going to explain the film to me with the synopsis.
Is that the point? So the point is to give an idea of what the I don't know. I think that's a good synopsis.
It is good. I mean, it describes exactly what happens in the film. Did the film have a message, do you think? Or was it just a comedy?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just all about, I think what it's come to pass. It's like, I think that's kind of the hard thing about these movies like this are kind of like cautionary tales, but it's like it's already happened. It's like, it's all about like it could be like viewed as like the internet and everything are just, it's surveillance and paranoia and everything is known about you. And
I think you're right. Yeah, it's kind of hard to watch now. So I think somebody watching it just for the first time now might not see it as that intriguing. In fact, I had a conversation with a student who was talking about how 2001 was okay, but it would have been cooler if there were like moments of the ending in the middle of the film and everything that, like a Christopher Nolan kind of thing. Like he has flashes to the future scenes where he's seeing his whole life and everything like that. And I'm like, I don't think anyone would have accepted that kind of narrative in 1968. I think the reason why Christopher Nolan is able to make the movies he makes is because 2001 laid the groundwork. But you realize at some point, everything's referenced. I just chatted with someone about how they hadn't seen Blow Up, right? And they're a photographer. And I'm like thinking, you should see the movie Blow Up. You're a photographer. They were talking about The Conversation, right? So they've seen The Conversation, and I know The Conversation was influenced by Blow Up, but I'm thinking back about Blow Up, and it's like, if you've seen Austin Powers, if you've seen, any movie with a photographer in it as a hipster, if you've seen any movie with mimes and confusion about, what reality is, you'd go, this movie's kind of, and I realized because it's so referenced, and it echoed throughout the whole culture, and filmmakers stole from it and were inspired by it, that now you watch a movie like that and you kind of go, yeah, I've seen this all before. What's so great about it? It's like, oh, this was the one thing that started it all. But yeah, you start to wonder, like this movie, it's like super paranoid. It's a really early paranoid movie. Yeah, we're talking about conspiracy theory movies, right? This is like 5 or 6 years before The Parallax View and 3 Days of the Condor and what's the other good conspiracy movie? Or even Capricorn 1, right? It's like then, but this movie is an early conspiracy movie and making you question, the powers that be. Also that idea that all these spies, they're not really fighting each other. They're all kind of just these floating, amoral, freelancer type people, right? Who aren't really beholden to one nation or one philosophy.
Which actually, just now that kind of flashes back to The Grand Illusion. If you want to get really pretentious,
you're right.
Film. That's what the Grand Illusion, the Jean Renoir movie is like. It's all about the class system. It's like the people, the soldiers from opposite sides have more in common than they do with their commanding officers, and the officers talk to each other from opposing sides, have more to do with each other, and the people from the same country don't see eye to eye at all. And it's just these strata of society, the different classes of people. And
it's actually more about,
that's all about.
Class as opposed to country, right?
Right.
And so maybe it's a cycle thing, right? Maybe we're just in a new paranoid cycle.
This is what I took away from the film to complement that. It's okay to assassinate people who are overexposed. It's safe to be nobody. And what do we do in a world where anybody could not be a nobody? Because
man,
because I mean that was sort of like he was fine and happy and safe allegedly when he was just a regular analyst, and then when he knew something or was essentially a celebrity of some sorts in the spy circle, he became immediately expendable. And they talk about that, like killing people. The only people that they kill are people that deserve to be killed, or are in the target. And I was like, it kind of feels like cancel culture, where as soon as somebody pops their head up, we take them down. You just need to keep your head down in life and you'll be fine. And as soon as he popped his head up and tried to be something bigger than what he was, he became a target and everybody tried to take him down.
So then the parallel to now, though, is that when you said that thing earlier about exposure, if that's how the whole fabric of society is now built on with social media, that everyone's exposing themselves, right? And so that means that cycle is not just happening to people with knowledge or fame or power, right? It's happening to everybody, right? You're going to tear down just your next door neighbor, right?
Thus the question, what do we do in a world where anybody could not be a nobody, right? I mean, anybody could be somebody. Have you seen Assassination Nation by chance?
I haven't.
It's a great film. You should watch it. It was actually well ahead of its time. I think it came out before sort of the outrage culture, cancel culture kind of peaked. And it's all about that. It's all about no one is, now that we are all online and everybody knows everything about us, at any moment, any one of us could be the scourge of the world.
Right. Yeah. It's terrifying.
It's exciting.
Two different perspectives. So so I guess maybe to go deeper with what the movie's about is, James Coburn, right, is the president's analyst. He winds up getting a whole bunch of information and he starts getting more and more paranoid, but he starts realizing that his paranoia is actual reality, right? That he's being pursued by all sorts of spy agencies around the world for the information he has in his head, and then the American spy agencies want to kill him because of the information in his head. He goes underground, winds up with a bunch of hippies, and then finds out the biggest, most dangerous superpower is not a government, it's the phone company. Mm-hmm. And so at the time, AT&T was a monopoly. It did rule, right? It was before AT&T was broken up. And so, I think the obvious parallel now is, when you think about what's going on with Facebook, when you think about what's going on with Google, right? Mm-hmm. And what else is left? There's one other, big company, right? Microsoft, I guess, maybe? Apple.
Right, except Microsoft's run by a philanthropic fella.
Well, he doesn't run Microsoft anymore.
That's true.
Yeah, he cashed out. Like all these World War II guys, somehow they got through the 50s where everyone was thinking, oh, yeah, these corporations are great. And then finally, so Catch-22 is about World War II, but it didn't come out until the 60s, right? And so it was like finally these guys got older and they started saying, oh, all these jerks that we were in the military with, they're running the world. It's not about your country. It's about the corporation and the profit, and we're going to do whatever we want to do, regardless of what country, who you are, and everything. It's just kind of this power structure that's beyond it. And now we have. I mean, I think everybody understands that now, right, with the corporations. But it's more disturbing because in this film because the phone company is a communications company, right? And that's what's stitching everything together. And everyone hates the phone company. Everyone hates the phone company is what they say. And it's like everyone hates Facebook, but how many people are on Facebook now? Mm-hmm. Billions, right? It's in the billions. So it's kind of that same parallel where we're in a new place where we had the internet was this wonderful revolution, and now it's becoming obvious that it's also a terrible thing that's oppressing us. And I think that's the same kind of thing that this movie talks about, 50 plus years ago.
Well, and another point of that album that you wrote that you thought was going to be outdated, which is just doubled down. The situation just doubled down on itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that, it was incredibly analogous to the times, but I forgot the point that the phone company was essentially the internet of that era. And that's what he talks about. They basically talk about the internet too, because they talk about, well, it's expensive to keep all these switches and all these devices and working and stuff. And he starts to describe things and I thought he was describing the internet. And then he talks about having something in your hand that has, the power of communication. And it was a microchip that they're going to put in your brain. But essentially, right. It's the thing I'm holding in my hand right now.
Smartphone.
It's a phone. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, that was always my problem with cyberpunk and, William Gibson is oh yeah, people are going to have jacks in their head and everything like that. And I'm like, that's not the big deal. It's like they'll be able, if they can figure out a way to control your thoughts or use your thoughts to control things, they're going to be able to have you be able to have a helmet or something. And it was nobody thought, everyone was thinking much more direct plugging in, but it was just oh no, all we have to do is we just have to build a computer that's small enough to carry with you everywhere and that's networked everywhere, and then everyone's brains will be sucked into it, right? You don't need.
You don't have to jack in or steal anything.
Yeah, you don't need to have the parasite sucked onto the back of your head. I talked about that. I said, like, imagine if you time traveled from 20 years ago and you came to the present day and everyone had a parasite, like mechanical parasite on the back of your head, and you'd be horrified. But then you also think about, but how is that different than you go into the future 20 years to the 2019, and you see everybody on their phone. It's pretty similar.
Well,
right?
It's like those scenes in The Office, those transition scenes in The Office, the British and the American one, where they just show people staring at their computers. Like it's like a sea of people staring at their computers. You don't realize, and then you like go to work and you're like, is that how people look? Because that looks so like they're zombified, and like then you look and they actually are. Jim, you've made a conscious choice to stay off of Facebook. Is this because you've seen these? We're the ones that haven't learned from all these warnings, and you have.
Yeah, because I saw this movie several years ago, and it's all there. It was very clear. But no, I don't know. Yeah, I guess I was never tempted. I don't know. And definitely it seems to have gotten worse and worse. Like, why would I? Yeah, why would I?
Why jump on now?
Yeah, exactly. Now that it's destroyed democracy itself, it's like, oh, yeah, I think I'll try Facebook now. Seems like this is the time to jump on.
I don't know.
There's a great moment where Rick was doing a rant on a podcast, and he's like, and now everybody's on Facebook. I don't know anybody who's not. Well, he's like, wait a minute, my brother Jim's not on Facebook.
Yeah.
Again, going back to Jim's magical nature, he makes sage decisions well in advance of having to.
I did get a phone this year.
I know. I was never more disappointed in you.
I don't use it very much, but
I held off until like 2000 before I got a cell phone.
I got one
19 years on.
Yeah, it was amazing.
2003 is when I got my cell phone.
Oh, really? Okay, so I thought I was really late on the boat.
I was in my job, and a guy couldn't get a hold of me all weekend.
Yeah.
And was so furious that the next Monday he said, "Get a cell phone. If you're going to work this job, you need a cell phone." And I was so wise back then. I can't believe I did it.
And did the boss call you Chris, or did he call you Found? Did he say Found?
No, I'm lost.
Get a cell phone. Oh, lost. Who's Found?
Jim. He's found
Jim. Okay.
Yeah.
Who am I?
You're Rick Rewound.
Okay. Got it.
He did call me lost because he couldn't get a hold of me.
Exactly. Your name is appropriate.
Well, forget about like Facebook and phones. I want to get like a gong after watching this movie.
I do too.
I mean, I've always thought gongs were really cool, but then after seeing the opening scene with James Coburn in his office, he's the analyst, and when he's alone, he just meditates and plays his gong.
I've always wanted to be a musician, and I finally found my instrument, this gong. Is there some way we can put it in the movie?
Right. Yeah. He definitely was probably a personal decision.
It feels like James Coburn spent a huge amount of time with a gong in 1967.
Well, I felt like he was actually playing it. I'd never seen somebody play a gong. I've always seen people hit a gong like gong, like a joke.
It's like priming it. I don't know what they call it, where you get it resonating. He kind of knew how to do that.
Yeah, and he's doing a kind of meditation thing. Yeah.
I loved it. That was great.
Should we talk about James Coburn, how weird he is? I just find him very strange.
Yeah, you go for it. I've got a Coburn anecdote, so I'll let you.
Oh, cool. It's just how smoothly he moves from being kind of like super cool and sort of on top of everything to being really twitchy and paranoid, and then also conniving and creepy, like how fluidly he's able to move between those things. And also how he's like a cowboy actor, right? Basically, right? And then somehow in that era becomes like a hipster kind of guy, like with the Flint movies, right? Flint, that's him, right? Yeah. What's the ones with Dean Martin? Those are Matt. Something else. Yeah. Okay. So the Flint movies. Yeah. It's like how he became like a hipster, which I'm sure he always was, but how, that's all I have to say about him is how
he even does an action star moment where he pops through that red smoke with the M16 and is shooting at the camera. And
it's just how extreme he makes his grin. I think he gets,
exactly.
Speaking of the Joker. Yeah. It's like he can, his crazy smile can be kind of endearing, but then he can make it really creepy. And in this movie, he goes, when he really starts getting paranoid, he turns the grin on full.
Yeah, and
rictus. It's a rictus.
You get the chills. Yeah, he definitely pushes it to a point where it's like, oh, this man's unhinged. Yeah, he can be unhinged, but he can also be really warm.
Kansas City. Food-wise, a city famous for its barbecue. But that's about to change. My name is W. Dave Keith, host of the podcast Taco the Town, and I believe that Kansas City is one of the most underrated, underappreciated, up-and-coming taco towns in the USA. On Taco the Town, we will shine a light on all the amazing tacos Kansas City has to offer. Kansas City is a great taco town filled with a variety of untapped taco stylings and flavors, and on the Taco the Town podcast, we won't stop until we've tasted every taco in the town. No taco table will go unturned. Each episode, we review a new taco joint with a special guest. We share taco memories, discuss taco topics, and put tacos to the test. We check the latest stories in taco news, and no taco is off the table on Taco the Town. If you love tacos, like I do, you're gonna love Taco the Town. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and Google Play. That's Taco the Town.
He would have been a tremendous Joker.
He would have.
I think the key to casting Joker is picking someone who you wouldn't pick. Jack Nicholson was an obvious pick and he was terrible, and Joaquin Phoenix was an obvious pick and he was terrible. What's his name?
Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger was fantastic, but you wouldn't ever pick him to be the Joker. He's too good looking. He's too suave. I mean, he's the only good thing about that movie, but he was good.
Yeah.
I think Coburn would have been great because the Joker is like sort of thin and tall and crazy, and as Jim pointed out, a master of his smile.
Right. What's your
Mike Coburn? Well, so in 2006, I was on this horrible project, and a friend of mine loaned me book on tape, Kid Stays in the Picture, and I listened to it.
He just died.
I know. I listened to it while I was in my rental car, and I actually would go out to lunch and take an extra long lunch so I could listen to more and more of it. And after a while, I very pathetically started to imagine that I was Joshua. I don't know if you've ever listened to The Kid Who Stays in the Picture, but every once in a while, Robert Evans would be like, "And to you, Joshua, I was never around for you, but I love you so much." And I was like, "I love you." I was like literally crying. I'm like, "I love you too, Dad. I know we didn't get time together, but it's okay." He was like, "Joshua." I'm like, "Yeah." And I was sitting in the car and I was like telling my friend, I'm like, "I think I'm becoming Joshua." He's like, "Who the fuck is Joshua?" So anyway, Robert Evans died yesterday. This is the eve after his death, I think, right? Yesterday he died?
Well, I mean, it could be 6 months from now. He could have died 6 months ago, Chris.
No, I'm going to say it's yesterday.
Okay.
So Coburn met Flicker, the guy who wrote and directed this film, on the set of Charade, which is one of my favorite movies with Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant, I think. And Flicker gave Coburn the script. He took it to Robert Evans, and this is one of the first films that Robert Evans produced after becoming the head of Paramount.
Wow.
Which is funny because you hear like Robert Evans had a lot of flops, and I think this one, what were the numbers on this film? Oh, it was $2 million budget and it made $2.45 million, so not much.
Yeah.
Which is actually $10 million in today's dollars. But anyway, it was critically well received. It got an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it was the child of Flicker, Coburn, and Robert Evans.
Wow.
Rest his soul.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on when you listen to this, because there may be a day you listen to it where he's not dead. Is that true?
That would be no. He will always be dead. Yeah, unless...
I'm not sure about that.
Now you're warping time.
I haven't seen the new Terminator movie, so I'll wait to see that before I make a decision on whether or not we can go back in time. Music. Gentlemen, you must have a lot of observations around the music in this film. You know, the Grateful Dead was supposed to play the band in this film.
Crazy.
Did you know that?
I just saw it when I was...
They turned it down because they couldn't have control over the scene.
Smart.
What were your thoughts about the music?
It was like Lalo Schifrin did the music, who did tons of TV music, that great TV music. That's what when the credits open, I was like, oh, is this like The Odd Couple or something? It definitely had that. Yeah. But he didn't do the Odd Couple, but that's all I could think of.
Mission
Impossible,
right?
And he did. It's crazy, to look him up. What he did everything, or he's still alive.
Still alive. That's
stuff.
the amazing thing. Lalo Schifrin is still alive.
He was not afraid to use a clap.
Although,
yeah.
Of course, by the time this episode comes out, Lalo Schifrin rested
he may not have been born yet.
Right. This was
clavicle. Is that what you call, or is that a bone? What's the thing? What's the
clavichord? Oh no, I don't know.
Claves.
Sorry. Yeah.
And flute. Lots of jazz flute. I always loved the jazz.
But sometimes
60s.
you can get that noise from a clavicle. It's like somebody breaking their clavicle. If you don't have claves. In fact, I think that's the origin of the claves, right? Is how to recreate that breaking clavicle sound.
Jeffrey Dahmer had used clavicles in his apartment in Milwaukee. Is it too dark of a joke? It wasn't too dark.
We were talking about music, man, and now you're talking about cannibalism?
People may not know who Dahmer is when this podcast comes out. He may not have.
I don't think they know now.
We could save people's lives.
Jim and I performed at a show in Milwaukee a few years ago, or maybe a decade ago, depending on when you're listening to this. And there's a poster, and it's Milwaukee, and I'm like going, and I said, why is William Shatner on the poster? And then someone said, that's Jeffrey Dahmer, Rick. I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'm supposed to know. I'm supposed to remember what Jeffrey Dahmer looks like. Even I'm having a hard time remembering Jeffrey Dahmer. It's been 25 years, right?
Yeah.
Right. So depending on when you listen to this, if you meet someone named Jeffrey Dahmer in Milwaukee, despite how handsome he is in his mustache, do not go home with him.
Is Lalo Schifrin in this timeline?
He's not acknowledging what. Yeah, Lalo Schifrin is. Tell us more about him, Jim.
He was like, this is 1967, so he wasn't, the music was pretty good, but I think he peaked about 10 years later. He did the music for The Cat from Outer Space.
Oh, man.
Great movie.
So that's the movie that our mother references she used to reference when she would say things like, well, you can take me to this because I had to sit through The Cat from Outer Space. It was like her example of the sacrifice she made for us as children going to the LaGrange Theater, and like I had to sit through some of the worst movies ever made, and that's
1970s Disney movies, like the Apple Dumpling Gang. What about
exactly like? And it's like The Cat from Outer Space is where it was like, that was a true test of her.
But I remember. I mean, I definitely want to watch it now. I've not seen it. I probably saw it on TV after that, but it's been years. I don't think I've seen it really since I was 9 years old.
It'd be interesting to see if there's a soundtrack record.
I looked it up already. No, there isn't. Yeah, it doesn't exist. But I didn't realize this is going way off. This should be.
Yeah, let's not let that
Disney,
happen.
Disney podcast, 70s Disney movie podcast. But what is it? Oh, it's like The Cat from Outer Space. It's like both of the commanding officers of MASH 4077 are in it.
Oh, man.
It's Harry Morgan and, McLean Stevenson.
Really?
Are both in
The Cat from Outer Space.
They're not playing, obviously, they're not playing their characters.
They're both,
They should. That would have been amazing if they were both Colonel Potter and whatever.
And
Colonel
where
Blake.
McLean Stevenson's from? Bloomington, Illinois.
That's right.
Is he really?
Bloomington is in McLean County, and Adlai Stevenson, the Stevenson family. His name is actually two of the biggest family names from the Bloomington Normal area in Bloomington, Illinois. McLean Stevenson. He's got the name of the county and the last name of some of one of the famous families. He's related to the Stevenson family.
But I did enjoy that every parent in this film was tearing their kid a new asshole, because I felt like, oh yeah, that's about how it happens at my house. Every parent is kind of tearing their kid a new asshole. Did you notice that? Like even the parent across the street,
right?
They show up at the weirdo's house and they walk in, like the parent across the street was just like
screaming at her kid to distract you from the fact that there was a phone company truck on the other side of the street. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
That was I need to be more careful when I watch. I got to watch it again because I don't know how many times the phone company truck is in the movie, but I noticed it there. But and I think that's part of it is kind of popping the balloon of that suburban life. It's like 70s movies, right? Spielberg, right? It's always the dysfunctional family and people, yelling at each other, right?
That's the thing about The Cat I want to go back to The Cat from Outer Space.
Yeah.
I have to watch it. I haven't seen, like I said, I haven't seen it since I was 9 years old, but I think it's very obvious that E.T. is just a total ripoff of The Cat from Outer Space. And I looked it up and no one says anything. Maybe we're going to be attacked, but maybe there's some suppression going on, but it seemed like very obvious. And when I read the synopsis and what I vaguely remember the movie, it's like, oh yeah, this cute little thing is kind of like trying to repair his spaceship to get back, and these kids help him out. And well, it's adults help them out. But there are kids involved, and
and it turns into like a big chase with jeeps and military.
The government is definitely after the cat from outer space, and
that is a dead-on take. We are the Spielberg. He's going to send the assassination squad from Munich after us.
So that's the thing. I like watch some 20-minute video of a guy talking about The Shining, and no, it's not talking about so he's referencing what is it, Room 238? Have you seen that documentary where the guy goes off on the theories and everything like that? But then this guy goes off on a whole thing about how it's a Jungian thing and how Kubrick is talking about that secret book that Jung had that nobody saw for years, and then how he had that and how it's all Jungian and everything like that, and how the answers to The Shining are all based around Jung and everything like that. So if I can be roped into watching this ridiculous 20-minute video about that, I think you could be an internet star. You could get hundreds of thousands of views talking about how the cat from outer space is E.T.
You just made this podcast, Don.
Yeah, and I just...
Too bad you're not on Facebook.
I just worked this out just like in about 10 minutes. And like I said, I haven't watched the movie again yet, and his collar glows.
Right.
He communicates with his collar, and it's like the finger, it's like...
You nailed it. I'm all in. Who was the president in this film?
Oh, you mean who was president at the time?
No, I know who the president at the time was, but who was the president supposed to be in this film? They mention Jackie Kennedy in the film.
Right, but Kennedy was already dead.
Yeah, it's fictional. There's no...
It's not Lyndon B.
reference.
Johnson?
No, it's not placed in reality at all.
Because he says what? Doesn't he say something about the neighbor says something about the president being liberal?
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is kind of, it's like it is of its time, so it's LBJ, but there's no reference like it's supposed to be LBJ at all. I don't think in the movie, right?
Yeah,
there's absolutely
they consciously avoid.
There's absolutely no reference to. You never see him or the president, or he's just this. It's symbolic.
He just shuts the door to the Oval Office. That's the only.
Yeah, and I remember being a kid and seeing one of the Pink Panther movies where they have a guy who looks like Gerald Ford and being really freaked out about it in a movie, like seeing somebody, and I think they were intentionally implying that it's Gerald Ford. It really took me out of the movie, even though at the time Gerald Ford was president, right?
I liked Dulles Airport empty, Eero Saarinen, my favorite architect, did Dulles, right? It was like, how did they do that? It was like the scene.
You're asking me?
No, I mean, just how do they, how do you get an airport?
You spend a lot of time in airports.
How do you empty an airport? It was just an amazing shot. It was
my theory is it was a 4 a.m.
Yeah, but it was daylight.
You could see the light outside.
It was daylight.
It was probably 5. It was probably summer 5 a.m. or
When was it built?
Well, he died.
Oh yeah, he's
early. He had like a brain hemorrhage or something. He was had like a surgery and died.
It's not like they shot it before
I think
the
that
airport
may have
was
been,
open.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the last thing he did, or I think Dulles. It could have very well been one of the last things.
It was eerie
designed.
how empty it was. Like it
Yeah,
clearly
it could have been
was empty.
I think it was early. I don't think it was just built. I think it was around.
Maybe it was a terminal that they had closed and they shot in it, and then.
But it's the main building. Yeah, it's a huge building. That was great to see it. Just the scene they're walking through, and it's completely empty.
So not to actually analyze the film, but what were they trying to say something there? Because if you remember, most of the other shots in the film almost look like they were shot without the people around them knowing they were shooting a film.
Yeah, the New York.
Right.
Manhattan
Yeah, they're
shots
definitely-
are definitely.
So they're not
stealing.
afraid of a crowd, right? So why would they shoot?
Well, it's just
that
power.
empty
It's
airport?
because he's abducted, or he gets he's sucked in by the government. He's chosen to become the president's analyst, and he's summoned to D.C. and so he arrives at Dulles under the power of the government, and the airport is completely empty. So it's just
talking to the head
power.
of the CEA and the FBR, right? So yeah, it's just that's as super secure and private, right? So
so it would have it is an impressive vision, a scene, just like an empty airport like that. So I think it's just to show just how public can be just brushed aside almost or something.
out.
It's just like it's like we are in complete control.
And so that's the thing is this Ted Flicker guy he directed some TV and everything like that, but this is an impressive looking movie, these impressive shots and everything like that, and then looking up and seeing that it's William Fraker and seeing that name, and it's like he's the guy who did Sharky's Machine, right?
Yeah.
And so some shots in that were good, but it's like helicopter shots, yeah. And so it's like you can really see. I need to just do a deep dive into William Fraker, the cinematographer, because I think especially this film, it's impressive. The shots, there are a lot of impressive shots in this film.
Well, Sharky's Machine was shot well too, like all those sort of Rear Window-esque scenes, and there was lots of silhouette and good lighting, and it was a noir kind of trashy film, but it was shot elegantly. I thought.
So that helicopter shot from the Statue of Liberty, where you have a close up of James Coburn on the torch, and then it pulls back and goes throughout the city, right? Or goes to the city. So that, definitely, like, apparently that was William Fraker's signature move, because he did that twice in Sharky's Machine too, right?
Well, the other challenge is those scenes are usually super zoomed in, which means it's even harder to keep them stable.
Yeah.
And those, I was watching hard this time to all those shots, and they were pretty stable. I mean, they weren't today stable, but they were.
I mean, I think that definitely was close too. It was a helicopter shot. They probably could have gotten pretty close because it wasn't next to a building or they're above the Statue of Liberty. But the wind, his hair isn't blowing around, so they can't be too close with the helicopter.
And that's the thing is about that generation of cinematographers is they talk about that as they came from TV, so they had access to like news cameras. So a lot of them started out as news cameramen, and those cameras had zooms. Like news camera, film cameras had zooms, and so when those cinematographers started moving into narrative filmmaking, right, they brought those lenses where a traditional Hollywood cinematographer would never use a zoom lens, right? So that's why all the 70s films and parodies of them have zooms, right? Is because all of a sudden you had this new generation of cinematographers that came from TV and started bringing that gear. And so that's probably part of it, is like knowing how to basically get pretty close with the helicopter, but then have the zoom lens, right? And then zoom out while you're also pulling the helicopter away. So I think that it's if you start looking at films from that era, like Dog Day Afternoon, I think for some reason when I watched that I was like, okay, there's a lot going on with the zoom, Well,
it's interesting because Hitchcock used zoom as well, effective, but mostly for effect.
That
like the falling,
the vertigo effect, where you dolly and zoom, right? Yeah, that's true.
I was listening to some podcast about Lucas, who had failed with THX 1132, I think was the name of the
38. Which Lalo Schifrin did the music for too.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Well, he was complaining about, people were saying that it was soulless and there was no emotion in it. He said, if you want emotion, great, I'll kill a cat and people will cry. And then he made American Graffiti, which was his film to like show people that he could make people, he could very easily push those buttons. In this film, I thought there was a moment like that was sort of a dual emotion when she's taping his phone call and playing it back to the government agency, his girlfriend, who she's both betraying him and crying, showing that she loves him. And I thought, I was like, this is very mechanically pulled off, but I believe it. I believe that she's betraying him, and I believe that she loves him. And like that's all we had to know. And then from that point on, it carried through to the end of the film.
Yeah. She totally disappears. Though, she's not in the rest of the film until the end again. It's really interesting, to see how she's pretty much a main character and then is gone.
But they cover that base. They're like, she can come back and be at his Christmas party because we know she loves him.
Right. And she cried as she betrayed him. For the CEA.
Not CEA?
Yeah,
what it was?
CEA. So that was the thing, is you can see everybody's mouths, so that it was all FBI and CIA, and then they changed it.
Right, that's what I was wondering, because it seemed like they were overdubbing that every time they said it.
Yeah.
Because allegedly Robert Evans was threatened by the government, and that's why he added that tag at the beginning of the film.
Right.
Was to kind of a fuck you to the people that thought that he was making a subversive film.
My question is why did they overdub? What did Severin Darden said his mother, the Russian said his mother was not a pacifist.
Revisionist?
A revisionist. And they're overdubbing that too. So I'm curious what they said originally, like a Trotskyite?
A Leninist or something?
Leninist, yeah. Maybe they said that and they...
Fascist?
Yeah, I don't know what she was, but it was like they changed that too, and I don't know if that's a joke or if it was like, what would you change, from that? Because I was also like, once I was tuned into that, it was like, why? What? I should go back and watch and see, try to figure out what she was instead of a revisionist, because
Well,
it's a little weird.
And I'm familiar with the word revisionist. I'm just not sure what that is in terms of political terms.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. I'm glad
Yeah.
that it wasn't
I'm
just
not-
my
is
ignorance.
that what it is too? I'm not sure if that's
Yeah, I can't remember what they said,
That's
but
what he said.
It was definitely revisionist, and I was like, well, what? So she changes history? That's I don't understand.
I don't know.
All right, you got other notes there, Jim?
So one thing I thought, I remember about the music, one time I saw this, I think I must have seen it on television or like AMC at some point. Well, I'm trying to remember where I originally saw it, and then the music was all different, right? So there are all sorts of issues with the music in this movie. And so I must have seen it on television. When you saw it on broadcast TV, it would have all the original music. But when you watched it on VHS, it would have replacement music. And I had initially heard that was just that typical thing where they hadn't signed, the music wasn't cleared. Right. So it could be on broadcast, but it couldn't be on VHS because there was nothing in the contract about VHS right at the time.
Like Blood Simple. I just remember
Right.
that from the Coen brothers, where the bar, when it's like Motown night and he puts the coin in, the bartender, and it's like a booming Motown song. And then like when you see it somewhere else, when they couldn't get the rights for that song, it was like this lame, not a Motown song at all, or just very weak song. And it doesn't,
yeah.
it's
and
weird, completely ruins it.
Manhunter the same with Inagata Devita? I seem to remember in the theater seeing Manhunter, right?
Yeah,
and it's
there is
Inagata
a change.
Devita,
Yeah,
and then
there is a
on
change in
television it was something else, and it's just like, wow, this is really bad. Like the reason why the ending of that movie is good is because it's a freaking music video for Inagata Devita, right? It's like to sit in the theater and hear that, and then to see it on TV later, and it was like, ugh, it's terrible.
I believe I saw it on tape because I've never seen it in the theater, but I believe I saw it once with Inagata Devita. I think that was on video cassette.
Yeah, and I think it's been
TV.
restored or something. Yeah, I can't remember. But but this, from what I've heard though, what I heard is like at least the Barry Maguire song is that for a while, or Barry Maguire was a born again Christian, and at some point he just didn't want to give permission for the use of his music in the film because he didn't feel like it was
Christian.
Yeah, a morally upstanding movie, right? So it was his pre-conversion movie and the kind of character where he's this kind of druggy hippie guy, and so he didn't feel like the movie was a good representation of where he was at later, and so that I had heard that was the actual problem. Is for a while he wasn't signing over the rights for like VHS and
because
stuff like that.
Nobody's died in the name of Christianity, so why would he depict that on film? The people who introduced me to The President's Analyst and Manhunter and The Wicker Man were the Little brothers. And I'm actually happy to say that this podcast inspired me to go visit John Little in Boston. So in between the times we've taped, I was like, I've been talking a lot about you and thinking a lot about you. So I went out and had dinner with him. It was a great time. Cool. It was fun.
I found out that Neil LaBute directed the remake of Wicker Man.
Yes. Yeah, I knew that. The guy who does...
who makes movies that I never want to see
In the Company of Men?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. I mean, he's just like...
Friends and Neighbors.
Oh, yeah. Friends and Neighbors. That was a hard one.
Yeah. Were you there, Jim? I remember seeing him at Eberfest.
Yeah.
I feel like, he's a really complex person.
Yeah, it was like, like Ebert Fest is in Champaign, and it's like all kind of, it's a serious, film audience and stuff, but it's like middle, Midwestern and kind of genteel in a way. But it was like after that show that he was there in person, and he showed, it was Friends and Neighbors, right?
I think so,
and
yeah.
So Ebert is on stage interviewing him, and they open the floor to questions from the audience. And was it like someone up in the balcony is like, what is it? Something like, why do you?
I'm trying to remember.
If it seems like it's such a joke, like it was set up, but it wasn't. It was like, why do you think your characters need to swear so much? And then there's something like that, And then he was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" It was like such a joke. It was like such a setup, but that's all he said. He was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Well, he just doesn't know that people don't swear in the Midwest.
I just remember thinking that he kind of did not. Yeah, I think I trusted him less after that question and answer, where it's like, I think he might just be a bad person that wants to make people feel bad with his movies. It's not that he's trying to make the world a better place by showing how awful people are. I think he's saying people are terrible, and I want to show you terrible people people, and I want you to feel bad because I feel bad or something. I really got a
think so. I mean, I think
negative vibe off of him.
That's what I got out of it. Was my head was there at one time in my life.
Yeah,
I mean, I can understand. I could empathize with those movies. I thought the first one was cool until like I look back at it and I'm like, I was an awful person. It's like a litmus test for whether or not you should be.
So I guess that's not reason to watch the remake of Wicker Man yet.
No, I mean, I do want to watch it.
Yeah.
Just because I'm curious, but I think it's so bad that it's not even worth watching. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, should this film, The President's Analyst, be lost? I vote no.
I picked this movie. I like this movie, but I also feel like time may have passed it by.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Or it's made it more poignant.
No, it's great. Yeah, it's definitely great to watch. But it is, these do get more and more dated the more every time I watch, but that doesn't mean anything, who cares? It's great. It's of its time, but it's definitely better than there are all these other movies from that same period. They're very similar, like I Love You, Alice B. Toklas,
right,
and The Party.
The Party, which
are totally the same. Have the same little bits. They're like the weird, the kind of the straight normal guy, flirting with all the hippies, kind of going into this weird lifestyle, just flirting with the weird alternative lifestyle and going to some, hanging out with hippies or going to this party or
kind of puncturing the square lifestyle and then showing like a square guy going into the hippie world.
Yeah, they're all very similar. They have the little montages where that happens, but this is definitely the best of those. And it's more serious. It's got, and like you said, it's definitely come to pass. It's very. I think it was foreshadowing. I mean, it's
just
come
to
true.
see. Basically, it's just to see that the phone company's Facebook. I think that's just poignant enough.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's beautiful. I love this period. I love all these '60s movies and the music. I love all that jazz flute.
I love jazz flute.
So that's the one thing is like watching that intro thing with Godfrey Cambridge talking about the N-word and realizing maybe the first time I saw this was on television and that part's not in the movie, right? Because I'm also thinking anybody just going in and watching this movie, like turning it on cold, having no idea what it's about, if that's the first 5 minutes of the movie, you're going to go, I don't think I want to watch this.
It's almost Tarantino-esque.
It's so intense and emotional and not funny.
Yeah.
Really.
No.
It kind of twists, and he gets lighthearted and everything like that. But it's just like, oh my God, they open with that. And I'm trying to think, well, why did I keep watching this? And I'm thinking, well, maybe the first time I saw it, if it was on regular television, they would have snipped that whole part out.
I felt like it was a personal story of the actors.
Yeah.
I felt like the director said, hey, tell me the story the first time you had heard a negative, the N-word used in a negative connotation. And he went off.
So I read something and he said it was somebody else's story, but it was not Godfrey Cambridge.
Well, reflecting on the fact that in the first 5 minutes of this film, there's that impassioned speech around the N-word.
Yeah.
Should this film be found? And our litmus test for that is, would you recommend this to your students or colleagues?
Man, I don't know. I love this movie. I'm thinking also about William Daniels, Knight Rider's voice, right? And what is it? Plastics.
A huge part of this movie. I can't believe. I forgot all about William Daniels.
Is he the guy who says plastics in
Yep.
The Graduate? Yeah.
No, wait. He was his father.
He's the father,
He was not
and
the
then,
guy that says plastics.
Yeah, it's the other guy. But anyways, kind of playing that straight '60s guy, but then like how manic and crazy he is, and talking about the guns and how we're gonna arm before they, the left wing, kind of like a left wing gun nut kind of thing.
Right.
Just the weirdness of that and his mania in that, like how he's in Parallax View. Actually, William Daniels is too. Now that I think about it, he's more frazzled in that. He's like an ex, I think, like CIA guy or something in that. But so. There are moments in it that are so amazing that I want people to see it, but I do wonder, if it holds together, right?
I would recommend it to people, but I don't care what people think about me.
What I care about is, like, if I'm going to recommend a movie to someone, I want to make sure that it resonates with them and they value my opinion. So it might be the kind of thing where you nurture it, where it's like you definitely wouldn't say to somebody like, hey, you got to watch The President's Analyst, and that's the first movie recommendation you give them, right?
You might go with The Matrix first and work your way to The President's Analyst.
Or the cat from outer space.
Space,
Yeah,
exactly.
that'd be the second one.
So you've probably seen E.T., right? You got to see this movie, Cat from Outer Space. Spielberg ripped the whole thing off. So much better.
I was doing that the other day. Those people were talking about, oh, I love Hereditary. I'm like, have you seen Exorcist 3? It's the same fucking movie. And these people are like, what? I'm like,
That's another movie where somebody just mentioned it on Facebook, actually. It was watching Exorcist 3 and saying...
it's a great movie.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's not a great movie. There are pieces of it that are great, right?
Oh, I loved it. I
Is
mean,
that the-
you're right, but I
cat,
loved it.
The fish in the bathtub.
The fish
Is that
scene.
our
That's
fi-
what I
yeah.
said. I watched the carp scene the
Sure,
other day.
carp.
Exsanguination, the old woman crawling on the ceiling.
Yeah.
All that shit's
Oh,
in
that
Hereditary.
chilling moment, the one chilling, the scariest thing I've ever seen in a movie is when the bad guy or whatever in the nurse's outfit carrying the big chopper
shears,
scissors
yeah.
just walks by. Oh, that chills me just thinking about it. That upset me so much. And I don't like horror movies or anything, but yeah, so amazing. You know the story of that film, right?
No.
Is basically William Peter Blatty wanted to make a movie of his book, right? Which was not The Exorcist 3. He wanted to make a movie, and basically the only way he could get it made, he wanted to direct. William Peter Blatty directed it, right? The only way he could get it made is if they called it Exorcist 3, and so he had to modify his film in order to direct a film and get it made. It had to be Exorcist 3. So that film didn't start out as Exorcist 3. It started out as another book, and then he had to shape it and add little bits and pieces to make it Exorcist 3.
Yes, Scott and I love Exorcist 3, Blade. There's just certain films that resonated with us, no matter how bad anybody tries to tell us they were. There was something, I think the sum of its parts to us was greater than the whole when it comes to those films. Should we rewound this film? We rewatch it. I think Rick's conflicted about whether or not we should rewatch this film. I say yes. It was better this time than it was the first time I saw it.
Kind of dragged at the end. The last bit seems to lose its way. And
It moves so good. I was
the
thinking about
first
that.
half of
He
it.
moves so quickly from, like, there's not a lot of fat in it at the beginning, where he gets the gig, and then I'm thinking, oh, it takes a while for him to get super paranoid and get exhausted. But no, it's about like a 5-minute scene that he moves from, being the president's analyst and it being a cool thing to being a complete paranoid mess, right? And so it had lots of scenes and lots of action, but I agree. The ending feels a little, it loses it a little bit right at the end.
I'll have to wait a few years before I forget that the ending kind of drags, and then I'd watch it again.
Okay. The phone company is what drags for you?
I don't know. It would just seem, by
They
the time
just stretched
after
that
all
out quite a
that
bit.
stuff,
Yeah.
Probably think that of all movies. It's just like, it drags at the end.
I need to talk about Severin Darden, so the Russian guy. So he would show up as professors, and so he was a big Second City guy, right? Another person who was sort of like a seminal figure in Second City, the early days of Second City, and he played this professor character. I think that was one of his characters he kind of developed. And then he got trapped. He's fascinating because both him and actually Godfrey Cambridge were both in Monkeys episodes. So I remember him.
I
And
remember that.
Severin Darden usually had a beard. And he's in Real Genius. He plays a professor in Real Genius. Basically, any other time you saw him, except for this movie where he plays a Russian, he plays a professor. He has a beard and glasses, and he has that really interesting voice, but it's like another person who you'd see all the time on TV in little guest star spots, but never got beyond that, right? It's like should have moved up to this higher tier or something, but kind of got stuck. And so I find him fascinating. And then did you recognize who the phone company guy was?
No, who was he?
Schneider from One Day at a Time.
No. I love Schneider. I talk
that's
about
pretty
Schneider
amazing.
all the time.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, if you think about him, if you go, wow, that's how can someone be that Schneider character, right? And also be like this total like
Clean cut.
plastic corporate robot person.
Because he didn't
right?
have a cigarette pack.
Didn't
rolled
have
up
a
in his
mustache, didn't
sleeve.
have a cigarette. But
Yeah. Did Schneider and Miss Romano ever get together?
boy, I don't know. I actually didn't watch the show that much.
Oh, I watched it all the time. Valerie Bertinelli was on that show One Day at a Time. Did I ever tell you the story about when my son and wife met Valerie Bertinelli? And so Valerie Bertinelli, how does it go? So Valerie Bertinelli was trying to talk to my son. I think he was like 7 at the time. And she's like, "Oh, your name's Thomas?" She says, "My husband's name is Thomas. I should just divorce him and marry you." And then my son like runs around the back of my wife and is like super embarrassed. and my wife goes, "Oh, he's just so embarrassed. Probably because his dad's built you up so much because, his dad was in love with you when he was a kid." And she's like, "Oh, that's cute." And she's like, and my wife goes, "Well, actually, I think it's because his dad is in love with your ex-husband." and she's like, "Oh, I get that a lot." So
Eddie Van Halen.
Right, yeah. So my wife actually confessed my love for Eddie Van Halen to Valerie Bertinelli. That's happened
amazing.
in my life. Or maybe it hasn't happened yet. Who knows?
It will happen at some point.
Right. It's in the timeline.
Which leads to Cafe Wa.
Cafe Wa is in that. And
in
that
this
was
movie, there's a scene in the real Cafe Wa in Greenwich Village.
And which was run by David Lee Roth's uncle, I believe.
Uncle or father, did you say?
I think it's his uncle.
It was his uncle.
Yeah, so that's the connection there, man.
Yeah, I tell you, there's always, the Van Halens are always nearby. The spirit of this podcast, it's a Van Halen-esque podcast.
Yeah, I did listen. That was really funny when I called you a Sammy.
Sammy was not in Van Halen. That's an insult.
Artie Johnson was one of the FBR men. Artie Johnson
that's right.
from
when I looked this up before and I saw his name, it was like, oh, he's in this, and I completely forgot. And I
so
didn't
from
recognize
Laugh-In.
him.
Yeah, Artie Johnson from Laugh-In.
Without the glasses, he
Yeah.
didn't have the little.
And do you remember? Maybe that wasn't. I remember Steve Albini saying
Steve Albini was in this movie?
No, he said that I feel like this is true. This could be the dementia sort of mixing everything up, but I believe he said that his parents babysat for Artie Johnson and his brother, and the brother was funnier. Artie Johnson wasn't the funny one. How's that for a weird bit of trivia?
Man, we are coming with hot takes tonight. So take that, Artie Johnson. Take that, Steven Spielberg.
What else? Oh, the Killing Field scene. The one that you said.
I love that
Chris,
scene.
Yeah, you remember just so beautiful shots in this movie and beautiful setups.
What's the Killing Field scene?
The Killing Field is the field where he's with the hippie girl in the field, and all the spies from all the different countries are going to kill them, and they all each get killed. They kill each other.
Which reminds me of, I think, an earlier reference on this podcast was the Garden of Eden in the middle of Kansas.
Right.
The little crazy house.
Yeah, you and I went out there.
The sculpture around the house, some of the sculptures it's like a bird, and there's a cat, like maybe the bird's going after worm, and then there's a cat going after the bird, and there's a dog on a branch going after the cat, and there's a guy who's going to not shoot the dog. I can't remember. It is something like that, or there's and there's
it's
like
a fox or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like a Native American, and then
about to scalp the guy with the gun.
Yeah, and then there's like a Confederate soldier guy shooting the Indian, and then. It's crazy. It's just like that. It's like one killing the next one, going down like dominoes, taking each other out.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's totally
one of the themes of the sculpture on that. And
they've allegedly really fixed that up. Like they've made it even more prominent feature in that town.
I looked at the webpage, and it's all looks very nice. They definitely did some restoration.
We need to go. We need to go again.
I just remembered a movie I watched since the last episode, The Doberman Gang.
What's that?
Oh my God!
I'll remember it once you say it.
I was able to watch it free on YouTube. It's a bank robber has a terrible bank robbery experience with human robbers, and then his human gang, he says, it's the human element, that's the problem. And he starts saying, I'm going to get robots or something. And then he realizes he needs to train a team of Dobermans to rob a bank. And so it's a movie about a man training a pack of 6 Dobermans to rob a bank. And then you know what happens? The Dobermans rob a bank. It's really amazing. I saw this. My wife and I were talking about this movie, and it was like this was the most amazing movie we saw when we were kids. It was like if you couldn't make up a movie that would be a more perfect movie for kids to watch, right? Especially in the 1970s. It's bank robbers and it's dogs, right? Dogs robbing banks.
It's a heist film
For children.
Definitely a double feature with The Cat from Outer Space.
That's awesome. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to say, sincerely, there's no other way that I would rather spend my 49th birthday.
What?
But here,
Oh no,
with the
really?
two of you watching the President's Analyst.
But actually, it's not your 49th birthday.
Lost and Found and Rewound is fully funded by Lost and Found and Rewound Foundation funds. Lost and Found and Rewound does not use crowdfunding because our listeners have better things to do with their funding. There's no need to post reviews of Lost and Found and Rewound because our listeners have more valuable things to do with their time. In all sincerity, thank you for listening to the show. We truly appreciate it.
This has been a presentation of the Lotus Pod Podcasting Network.